Hi, I'm Dr. 𝘼𝙗𝙦𝙦. I'm joined with Dr. Matt Lampa, and today we're going to be talking about everything out of line with SAG on the Optometric Insight Show. Dr. Matt Lampa, thank you for being on the show. Appreciate it. Share with our audience a little bit about yourself, where you practice, when you graduated, all that good stuff about your optometric career.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I have a chance to work full-time here at Pacific University College of Optometry in Forest Grove, Oregon. And Oregon's home for me. It's where I grew up, spent undergrad, and went to optometry school here at Pacific. And most of my role at Pacific is in the area of contact lenses. And I do have the fortune of spending a day a week at a private office, which is actually in my hometown. So kind of time away from Pacific, but that's me professionally.
That's great, Matt. I know you guys have a great reputation for contact lens research as well, too. It's where we get a lot of the information that we utilize on a daily basis. And one of the cool, and this was a research paper that you guys put together years ago, but it was describing some of the opportunities, but challenges as well, too, with line of sight and multifocal contact lenses. And if you could take me through that a little bit on really what you guys were looking at there.
Yeah, I know it might sound super nerdy to talk about line of sight and visual axis. It's kind of takes us back to those first and second year, like wah courses that you're just, how is this ever going to be clinically meaningful? And one of our frustrations at Pacific was just around, multifocals and multifocal unsuccess, really. Like, is there something that we're missing? We're never really satisfied here. So we're always searching for the next thing. And we got to thinking about how refractive surgeons treat the procedure itself, kind of optimizing their surgical outcomes. And with them, it's a one-shot deal. So they really have to nerd out about getting, everything lined up as precisely as possible. So most of this discussion in the literature related to visual axis and line of sight is actually from refractive surgery. And then the next thing we got to thinking was, well, we can actually image the optics that the patient's actually seeing with the multifocal lens on their eye if we were to do corneal topography right over the top of the contact lens. And the advantage there is we kind of get a little bit of a picture of seeing what the patient's actually seeing with their contact lens as those multifocal optics are over their visual axis and within their pupil.
And I was going to say, Matt, does that work because the multifocal optics are actually sitting on the anterior surface of those soft lenses?
You got it, 100%. Yep, that's really the only way that we're able to image it is because we can perform topography right over the top of the soft contact lens on their eye. So, yep.
You repurposed a technology that was meant to measure corneal curvatures, the tear film on the cornea, and kind of extrapolate corneal curvatures to us. And you said, well, we can repurpose this for another use. I mean, it's essentially what you're saying.
Exactly. Yep. Just a quick little hack. Yep.
Well, tell us what you found.
So early on, we were sort of expecting to find that, yes, there's this misalignment, that knowing that when you ask a patient to look straight ahead in the corneal topographer, that they don't actually look straight ahead. They look off to the side a little bit because of that displacement of their fovea temporally. They actually look through the nasal portion of their cornea. That's that whole, visual axis, kind of offset deal that the refractive surgery literature found. And we found that, but the thing that we weren't necessarily initially aware of was how poorly centered some of these contact lenses are. I got to be honest, the first time that we ever did this, I'll never forget it. I with the contact lens on, looked at it with the slit lamp first, and I called it centered, and then went behind the topographer, and it was like really high, really superiorly displaced. And I thought, gosh, that's not right. Like something's wrong. Took the subject out, put him back in the slit lamp, and sure enough, the lens truly was decentered in the superior direction. Now, when I called the lens centered on my initial look, all I was looking at was, does the contact lens cover the limbus? And though that was technically true, if I was really picky, if I was really choosy, it technically covered more superiorly than it did inferiorly. So it really proved that not only does it matter, where our visual axis is, where our pupil is, it also really matters where the contact lens is actually sitting on their eye. So yeah, that was I think the initial like, what? So we really needed to then look at do soft lenses actually center on the eye? And the answer is kind of no, they don't.
Well,
So
it's interesting, Matt, too. So you're really looking at a combination of two things. One, where we're looking through the pupil. We actually did some work in our office, Matt, where we actually looked at pupil centration just horizontally, and we found that people with larger, well, we famously called it angle lampa for you. If you're the first one to bring this up to us, I didn't look at it before you kind of brought it up, but angle lambda, we found that people with larger angle lambdas actually tended to have pupils that were more nasally displaced in their actual horizontal visible iris as well. But we're looking at two things. One is patients looking through a more nasal portion of their iris slash pupil than we would expect. And two, if a lens is going to decenter, it's maybe mildly decenter temporally, right? You're setting the stage for that outcome. So now there are companies that are building or producing lenses that have offset optics nasally, correct? To kind of help.
yeah. Yeah, we now have soft lens companies, we have scleral manufacturers doing it, and it's for all the same reason. As the contact lens begins to interact with the broader and broader portion of the sclera, the lens just wants to kick over temporally more and more. So in terms of the complexity of the optic in a multifocal, we're only talking 2 millimeters, 2.5 millimeters in terms of optic zone. So if the lens shifts even a little bit, it's going to matter significantly for the patient. So yeah, pretty cool to see that companies are giving us product solutions to the problem.
It totally explains too, Matt. Like, when you go back to your original question, like, why do you put somebody in a multifocal and they do great, and then you put another person like seemingly same measurements and they're unsuccessful in that same multifocal?
Totally.
Explains it.
Yeah. Or you put someone in a center near contact lens and they see gray in the distance and they can't read anything up close. But what's the deal? Well, because they're not looking through the ad, they're looking through the distance portion, or vice versa. Same thing. You put someone in a center distance and they see great up close, they can't read anything far away. It's like, what's going on? I don't get it. So yeah, doing topography over gives them a picture of what they're seeing.
Early on in my career, you have no idea how many times I thought I had the lenses switched, Matt.
Yeah.
So Matt, while we have you here too, I'd love to actually talk to you about some other research that you guys are doing here, and that's really understanding the sagittal depth of contact lenses, the variability that exists in that sagittal depth, and really the influence on fit. So tell us a little bit more about that, Matt.
Oh yeah. Hey, this it sounds kind of funny to say, like, soft contact lens research, new and exciting, but we feel that there's something else to be learned with soft lenses. Even though they've been in the market for decades and decades, we're still learning. And one of the things that we felt frustrated with at Pacific was the main way in which you adjust the fit of a soft contact lens was through its base curve and diameter. But you're at a little bit of a mercy, of the company, saying that the 8.6 from company X is the same 8.6 that it is, or from company Y, and that may or may not be true. Just like shoes or whatever, shoe company X might not fit the same as shoe company Y, that kind of thing on terms of your feet. So what we had hoped to do was to try to partner with a company that could actually tell us what the sagittal height of a contact lens, soft contact lens is. And we worked with a group in England called Optometric, and they were kind enough to measure basically all of the commonly commercially available sphere and toric soft contact lenses. So single-use, daily disposable, 2-week and monthly lenses. And we're in the process of working on the multifocals. Not quite there yet, but it's been awesome. So
what are some of the clinical findings that you found that are either you guys have proved it already, done the research on it, or just seeing anecdotally with the various SAG heights and some of the clinical considerations that we need to be taking into account when we look at this kind of stuff?
Oh yeah, such a good question. So we've charted it out like a literal chart with bar graphs in terms of on the left-hand side of the chart are the shallower, lenses, or what you could argue are the kind of flatter fitting lenses. And then all the way to the peg to the right-hand side of the chart are the deepest lenses, what you could argue be the tightest fitting contact lenses. And for me, it's nice to know those extremes, what's the shallowest, what's the deepest, because if the patient you have, for example, let's say they have a really large, deep eye and you fit them in on that chart, you fit them in the deepest or arguably the 1 or 2 deepest contact lenses on that chart, and you still don't get the fit that you like, you basically just prove the case that the patient just won the right to wear a custom soft contact lens. It's a great, great way to do it. The other way to do it is if you have a patient come into your office wearing brand, whatever that brand is, and they're telling you, yeah, hey, this lens isn't comfortable on my eye, and you identify the reason why. It's too tight, it's too flat, whatever the case may be. You know which direction to go in the chart. It's you just pick a lens that's shallow or deeper depending on what your clinical information is telling you. Almost like using your slit lamp as the OCT. You're using the contact lens that's on their eye already, and then just moving up or down from there. Or maybe another way to do it. Maybe the patient is let's say they're comfortable. Let's say they're happy with their contact lens, and they're in a monthly. And you're like, you know what, this patient's better served with a daily. I want to move this patient onto a daily. So you don't really want to change the fit profile. All you're wanting to do is kind of move them in from a 2-week or monthly product into a daily. I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can break that down.
And if they're successful in a certain depth in the monthly, you would likely reach that more depth. Matt, everything you're saying makes for some patients, they can wear anything, right?
Totally.
But there are some patients where we've had them where we've tried these lenses or these more contemporary lenses and they haven't been successful, and we've kind of blamed silicone hydrogels on them. We've kind of blamed daily disposables, but maybe it's because we're selecting incorrect sagittal depths, and what you're sharing with us may actually be the answer to these patients. Is there a place where the listeners could actually find access to this research that you guys are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. We've made those charts all publicly available. They're hosted on the Pacific University website. So whatever internet search engine you prefer, just put in Pacific SAG story. It might help your internet search engine a little better if you put in the name 𝘼𝙗𝙦 Fujimoto. She's on faculty with us here at Pacific, and she's the one that posted them up there. So that should help Google or whatever you're using find it. So pretty awesome stuff. Use it away. And as we get new contact lenses entered into the marketplace, we're going to continue to update it. And like I mentioned earlier, we're working on the multifocals right now. So stay tuned.
Now, one other quick question too, and I don't know if you guys have looked at this, but I would assume that there's probably not much or any sagittal depth difference between power profiles within the same lens design. Is that a correct assumption?
Oh man, such a good question. So we are in the process of working on that too. So I should say that all of the contact lenses that we measured that were sphere were -3. If it was a toric lens, it was -3, 1.25 at 180. We're in the process of doing the exact same thing, kind of repeating it with plus, so +3 now. So 6 diopter difference, and we'll see. So stay tuned on that one. Don't have a great answer for it at the moment, but.
Okay, Matt. Well, that'll be interesting to find out here. And again, always appreciate your willingness to share your knowledge base and your information. This was so interesting. I think things that we can kind of apply immediately into clinical practice, which is what I love when we get the chance to talk about this. Well, thank you, Matt, for being on the show. Truly appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us on this episode of the Optometric Insight Show. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast where you can hear all the newest, latest innovations in eye care.